Broadcasting worldwide from the beautiful hill country in Texas, this is OneRadioNetwork.com.
Well, a very pleasant good morning to you. This is Patrick Timpone. Good morning. It is almost the last day of July. That would be tomorrow, the last day of July. Andrew Goss is here tomorrow on The Real World of Money as we talk about money issues. That's why it's called The Real World of Money. Andrew Goss tomorrow. Thursday, Dr. Stuart Nunley. He's a dentist. He's my dentist, and he probably one of the best. Well, I'll say the best. I mean, I think he's one of the top holistic dentists, truly biological dentist in the world. He's on top of his game. He has some new findings that he wanted to share with us, and if you have questions about your dental issues, the root canals and the rest of it, the mercury, and you can send us those questions anytime between now and Thursday. And of course, during Thursday's show, Patrick at OneRadioNetwork.com. Patrick at OneRadioNetwork.com. Also, Leonard Honor tomorrow, on Thursday. And I think you're going to find him very interesting about fear and about 9/11 and other things, and what he believes is what's this whole thing is all about. This thing called fear, and also programming people and such. Open phone on Friday. This morning we're going to have some fun. A listener introduced us to this man on his website. His name is Dr. Stanley Bass. Dr. Stanley Bass. He's an ND, a DC chiropractor, PhC, PhD, DO. I guess that's Doctor of Osteopathy, DD. Natural Hygiene doctor. You've heard of that, right? He's been testing a disease recovery theory, water fasting on himself at age 19, followed by many years of research. He's nutritional doctor since the 1950s. In New York area, he supervised about 30,000 health recoveries using diet and fasting. He has a likely record of about 1,000 personal fasts. He is Knight of Malta. We'll see what that is. Interesting. 1956. You can see his picture on the website. Well, he's now 95 years old, and he's in Florida looking for a place to live, buying some property, and he's staying at this hotel, and all he had was a cell phone, but the hotel has been very kind and working with us to set Dr. Bass up on a landline, and he finds himself out in the lobby. It's the only thing we could do, but this is going to work. Well, Dr. Bass, good morning. How are things in Florida?
Beautiful day here, Patrick.
Yeah. And what are you doing down there, Doc?
Well, I'm staying here while looking at properties and working between New York to sell a property there and use the money to buy a property here.
And what's the name of the place you're at in Florida?
The Avalon Inn.
So you became a chiropractor when?
Well, I became a chiropractor, that was before, about, I'm not sure. It's probably maybe in the 50s, somewhere around there.
Yeah. And you have written how many books?
Well, I've written about 8 books, but I've got about a few more in preparation.
8 books.
Yes.
And you your work is ongoing with diet and nutrition, right? This is what you really study, and you read a lot.
Yes, well, actually, I started on my own at the age of 16 when a friend made a recovery from a so-called heart condition, and he had been afraid to move around for 4 years. And one day somebody recommended he go to a naturopath. When he did that, the naturopath examined him, said there's nothing wrong with your heart. You've got gas pressure against your heart.
Gas?
Gas pressure from his eating that was causing the pain. So he put him on a juice diet, an orange juice, for 10 days, and since then he's been perfect. There was never any heart problem.
He fasted on orange juice.
Yeah, right.
Uh-huh.
So when I found that out, I said to myself, I'd like to check this doctor out, this naturopath, because it sounds very interesting. So I went down to the New York Public Library reading room and research room, and I started to look at some names that his doctor gave me.
Uh-huh.
The first was William Howard Hay, M.D., and then Rasmus Halsega, who ran a health sanatorium in Upper New York State. And then each book I read mentioned 10 other doctors. So I kept doing this. I went back about 3 times a week and spent about 6 hours a day and taking notes. And I did this for years. And finally I came at a certain point, I went on a juice fast myself.
Uh-huh.
And in 10 days, my complexion cleared up, became beautiful, and I felt wonderful. And let's see now. Yes, while I was doing research in the public library, I came across a name, John Henry Tilden, an MD who had a fasting institution, and it was about a block long. Mm-hmm. And I was reading his books, and he said some things that really knocked me for a loop. And I was only about close to 16 then. He said, syphilis and gonorrhea are nothing but diseases of toxemia. His germs are not the problem, but the diet is the problem. And he said, things that you get like colds, fevers, flus, are attempts of the body to cleanse itself, and in doing so, it throws out the toxins, and you get rid of all the problems. Even though some medical people feel that these diseases are caused by germs or viruses.
Sure.
But in the field of natural healing, germs and viruses are there to break down tissue that is of low quality, so it could be easily eliminated from the body. They're not causes of disease, they're just workers on disease. And they've been associated in the wrong way. So I said to myself, my God, if a flu is nothing but a cleansing program, if what he's saying is true, this revolutionizes the whole theory of healing disease. And I said to myself, how can I prove that? So I said, well, okay. I was living with my sister and 2 younger brothers. My mother had died. Father died when I was 5. And I pretty much had the say of the place because I was the oldest male. Mm-hmm. And I was living in a room, and out of the window was a backyard that belonged to us. So I decided to test a flu on my body and see what happened if I recovered to it, see how it affected my health. To see if Tilden was correct. Because if he was correct, that's the end of my old life, you know?
Yeah, the deal, the game has changed if this theory, this germ... Right.
The results were just too important to ignore.
Okay.
So here's what I did.
And let me just say, this was in the must have been in the 1930s, right?
1936.
1936, so just after the Depression, Great Depression.
Right.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
So I asked myself, now how can I get a flu? Now this was in the winter time. Mm-hmm. So I opened the window to the back yard. It was winter, and a big breeze came in. So I said, good. So I took a hot bath, I sat in it, got into a good sweat, and without drying my body, I laid down on my bed, which I had put an oilcloth over so it didn't get wet. Without drying my body, I laid down in front of this open window and let the wind blow in. And of course, I didn't tell my sister or anybody what I was doing because they think I was crazy. So I just laid there, and the wind was blowing, so after a while, I began to shiver. And my body began to shake. And then the next thing I knew, I started to get hot. And this was the beginning of a fever, which at the time, I believe, went to close to 105.
Oh, wow.
So I laid there, and things got hot, so of course by that time I would dry it up. And I started to cover myself because I was starting getting cold now because I was in a fever. And then I fell asleep. And it was a very deep sleep, one of the deepest I ever had. I might have been on the verge of coma. Anyway, I slept for 3 days and nights, and I hardly awoke.
Really?
I didn't have to get up to urinate. I didn't eat. I didn't do anything. I just laid there in bed. And after 3 days and nights, I was on fast. So I asked myself, how do I feel? So I felt great. All the chills and fever had disappeared. I felt great. And I checked my pulse. My pulse was, it was about 60. And then I took my blood pressure. A few days later, I got an instrument. And my blood pressure was 90 over 60, which seemed to be my permanent pressure at the time. So to me, it didn't tell me too much. All I knew is that I fasted 3 days and recovered from the flu. And I felt great now. The only thing is I'd lost about 10 to 12 pounds of weight. Probably body fluid operation. So I felt so good, so I said, well, he talks about fasting. As long as I did 3 days of a fast, and my appetite disappeared after 3 days, which is usual on a fast. I said, why don't I just stay on this for a while and see what the fast will do for me? So for 10 days, I didn't eat.
Wow.
I let nothing but water. This was the acid test for Tilden. So at that time, I got a call, and I was band leader asked me if I want to come out and work with his orchestra for the summer, and a summer job in the Catskill Mountains. And for me, being 16 years old, I needed the money because, we were just a family living together without any, just on the money we could make. That time I was making money as a musician. And my sister was working in a job. And then I taught my 2 other brothers how to play musical instruments. And so they started to get little jobs. Well, anyway, on the 10th day, I broke the fast because I had to get ready for the job. And I had to carry a set of drums and 3 bags and to go up about 3 flights of subway to get to a train. So my brothers helped me, and I went up there. And now, after that, I said to myself, Tilden was right on the head, and Tilden was considered one of the great leaders in natural healing. So, of course, I went back and I read all his books.
Tilden.
John Henry Tilden. He was an MD. And then I went from one to another, and before I knew it, I had done several fasts. I had been on several diets, and my diet had changed radically. And I had learned a lot because I was taking notes and doing all this consistent research in the library. So that's how I got into it.
I see. And these doctors then, they must have been, in the early 1900s writing this stuff?
Yeah, Tilden was the early 1900s. And then I found out that one of the great authorities was Herbert Shelton. And field of natural hygiene, and he was in his, he must have been in his 60s or 70s then.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a big fasting institution in Texas where people came down and fasted for disease. And usually after a week or two, or sometimes 3. In those days, they did long fasts, some of them going up to 40 and 50 days.
Wow.
Like in the Bible.
Yeah. Like when they got sick, they'd go to these clinics and just fast, and they would get well.
Right. They give them a bed and a room, and of course they had maids there to change everything.
Mm-hmm.
And they had food for those people that were breaking a fast.
Yeah.
Because they had to get them into digestion. So these people, when they finished the fast, they were usually put on fruit juice, and fruit juice activated the body and started the digestive process. And then after a day or two on fruit juice, they would give them like soups, liquid foods, and then within about 3 days, they were digesting food.
Yes, and then what?
And then they kept them there for about 10 days. By that time, they were able to eat normally, 3 meals a day. And these people went home, and then new people would come in, and that's the way they operated it.
Oh, so they never generally didn't just put them on water. It was just...
No, the water was temporary. In other words, let's say a person had a cold.
Mm-hmm.
Usually a cold you can knock out in 2 days on a fast. But I was on the flu. So the flu is considered a very serious cold and dangerous. So being that, I finished 3 days in total rest. And doing that in total rest makes it worth a lot more.
Yeah. Because
that energy was saved, and the detoxification was twice as normal as fast as in an ordinary fast where they move around, or read or take walks.
Yeah.
So,
but if I understand it, though, excuse me for interrupting. If I understand that when you precipitated this, what you call a flu, by getting very, very chilled, then this flu virus went in and started eating up tissues, toxic things in your body, and that's what is called the flu.
Well, the way it works in stages. See, usually a flu starts with chills.
Right.
I started with chills because I was at the ordinary temperature then. But then, so my body started to shake from the chills, and then I started to cover myself, and then a fever started, and when the fever started, it dried me completely, and my body became hot, so I had to throw the covers off because I was sweating then.
Mm-hmm.
So then when the fever started to abate after several hours, and then my temperature came down probably to a few degrees anyway, so I covered myself and I went to bed. And I was exhausted by then of staying with the chills for hours to make sure I got the flu, So then after that, and then when I woke up on the third day, I realized I had been very close to a coma because I don't remember even waking up once in the 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
So that was quite an experience.
Yeah, so where does the actual virus come in? Did that come in from outside of you, or is that already...
It comes from outside.
It comes from outside.
Well, actually, if you want me to explain the germ theory of disease...
Sure.
Actually, bacteria are everywhere. Depending upon your diet, you will have bacteria in your body doing digestive duties. For instance, if you eat a lot of carbs, you'll have the bacillus that digest carbs.
Okay.
That produce gas and certain types of digestion. And then the feces will accumulate from the bacteria alone. And it could be pounds of feces just from the bacteria. The weight of the bacteria. They multiply in the millions.
Mm.
Well, and now let's talk about another kind. Let's take the more dangerous ones, like they call viruses. They say viruses are found in this kind of disease and that kind of disease. Well, viruses are found more in protein types of disease or glandular or more advanced conditions where glands get involved. See? But what are viruses? They're a type of life form that according to medical theory, that produce disease. But I had done all this research about natural healing, and I early came to the conclusion that germs were basically harmless. I never worried about germs. I was never afraid of it, and I never got into diseases from anybody else that I remember.
Uh-huh.
The only time I got sick was if I changed my diet, or I went on binges. If I went on ice cream, or went on pizza, or overdoing certain kinds of diets just for excitement, then I would set up digestive problems, and then bacteria would come in to try to break it down.
Okay.
And if they didn't break it down, then I would go into the more serious things, like chills which come before fever.
So the bacteria is there, Dr. Bass.
You can't get rid of bacteria.
Yeah, so it's all there.
Right.
And it tries to break down the particular toxins that have accumulated in the body.
Right. Bacteria are capable of changing their character.
Yeah.
If you have a bacteria of a disease, and a lot of doctors tried this, they swallow a lot of bacteria by the millions. And they found that depending upon their diet, the result came. Now, if you're swallowing a lot of viruses and you're eating a lot of sweets and chocolates and candies, they thrive on carbohydrates.
Okay.
So then you could get a serious condition. That you get a high fever, you might get inflammation, you might get pains from ulcers, or other types of body inflammations. And if you went to a medical doctor then, they would diagnose you according to your symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
And they'd say you have this kind of a virus. Or if they do work with a microscope, they'll look at the bacteria, and they'll find maybe 10 kinds, so they'll list the names. And as the disease progresses, they say it's this bacteria causing it, or this this type of kind of a life form.
But it's not. It's the bacteria just doing what it's...
Right, because I was just 16 then, and now at my age, I've exposed myself to thousands of diseases, because I was in show business for 35 years when I was very young. And I went out with, a lot of different kinds of people. People who had... I was never afraid of people who had coughs or colds. I let them even cough in my face because I just laughed. And when I saw what they were doing to get rid of colds, I laughed because it was just a matter of ignorance, in my opinion. So in my life, I never had any fear of bacteria from the time of this doctor, reading his work, because he was genius. Well, anyway, I came to the conclusion that all diseases, as the books were saying, all diseases were caused not by bacteria, but by how you lived and how you ate. And how you ate determined what kind of bacteria came into your body to break it down so that your body can survive. And nature has adapted things that way.
So if you eat a piece of, say, grass-fed meat or an egg, well kept, good egg, or a donut or a pizza, there is different kinds of bacteria that come along with those foods to deal with the excess?
Right. In other words, if you eat a lot of carbs, and a lot of sweet carbs, like candies or sodas or cakes like kids eat, then you get a lot of the skin breakout bacteria, or the bacteria that cause a lot of cold sores, or a lot of gas in the body, or diarrhea in the bowels, because these kind of bacteria are needed by the body to help cope with these problems.
To help cope with the excess that you've just taken in?
Right. And if you live on a minimum diet where there are no excesses formed from food. See, actually, here the story is this. I give you really the secret of health.
Okay.
Right now, listen carefully because this is 94 years of my life.
All right.
And the secret is this. That nature designed life in a very way. It's so brilliant that we don't understand it. Some of the doctors get the idea. most of them don't, because once they got into the theory of germs, they went off track, because the germs had nothing to do with diseases, really. Because I have friends of mine that are doctors that swallowed germs that cause diseases, and they never got anything.
So they got off track when they did the whole germ disease theory in the Louis Pasteur.
Pasteur. You remember when Pasteur came out with the germ theory of disease?
Well, I wasn't around, but I remember the story. All right.
Yeah. Now listen to what happened. Pasteur created a theory of disease. So the medical profession picked up on it, and it spread right through the whole medical profession in the world. Then Pasteur, as he got old, he realized he made a mistake. So he apologized to the world, and he said the germs were not the cause of disease. He says there were other causes, diet and things like that, but it was not the germs. But they refused to change the theory because it gave them tremendous wealth. Then everybody had a fear of germs and diseases, and people were afraid to think of being their own doctors because they didn't know how to deal with germs that had such power. They could cause diseases, all kinds of diseases, and some of them are fearful.
So it's based on fear.
Right. So based on fear, the medical profession became very, very bold, and with using disease gave them power. And then this power spread, and who are they going to believe? You know, when some person gets sick, they go to a doctor. Whatever he says is true. And so the whole world believed the doctors, and they began to rule the roost.
Wow.
And then, of course, all other professions fell in line with that. And at that time, there were a lot of different professions. There were about 6 kind of medical professions. And the AMA passed laws against them, wiping them out, saying they were not real professions, that they were quacks. Mm-hmm. And they began to eliminate competition. So until the AMA, under William Fishbein by then, it was his name, Fishbein, he wiped out mostly of the competition, and there's plenty of proof that they used a lot of gangsters to intimidate and break up organizations in their monopoly work. So that's how they developed to be so-called experts. But right now they're doing research that some of the forward doctors have found the right track, but they refuse to do that research because it proves them to be right, and then they'll have to revise their theories. So they're doing only research which proves that what they're saying is true.
So it's much like a religion, where when you've been doing it for 75 years, it would take a great deal, something huge, to say, you know what, I think we're wrong here. We got to change, and so that's not likely to happen.
Yeah. Now, just like I proved it, I was just an ordinary kid, and I was a musician by profession, and I had no knowledge of health then. I was just 16, but my own research, I began to read these doctors, and I became more knowledgeable, and I began to learn more. Before I knew it, I was taking care of all my relatives. And I was taking my sister got married to a man, and his father had a heart condition. Mm-hmm. So by that time, everybody knew that my brother Stanley, you want to know anything about health, go to him. So he came to me, and I took care of them for nothing. So these fellows would give me gifts. They were giving me all kinds of, antique things, and then my other relatives started to come to me, but mostly my son on my sister's side with the husband. So my studies continued. Then I started to go to schools. Then I started off with the American School of Naturopathy with Benedict Lust, who was a big outfit on Lexington Avenue selling, all kinds of foods, nature foods. He was a German, Benedict Lust, and he used to say, the cause of disease is mucus and slime.
Slime.
Yeah, that's the way he pronounced slime. He was a German. So then I went to that school, and I met some a lot of doctors then, and I became knowledgeable in natural healing. ND, it's called naturopathy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Then, of course, music was good for me then, so I was doing a lot of jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd go on the road, then I'd come back. Then I'd go in another school, then I'd go to a dietetic school.
Huh.
And I went to the American School of Dietetics, and then I got another degree. But when I went to dietetic school, I was very knowledgeable by then, and I started taking care of the teachers.
Yeah.
And then the professor in chemistry, they prepared us to take a test so we can get our license, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we had to study a lot of bacteriology, which I knew was nonsense. So I said to this chemist, I said, you know, Dr. So-and-so, I have positive proof from my experience that bacteriology is a lot of crap, you know. And it's not true because you can get diseases without exposure to germs or to germs. And the diseases just get named by the doctors according to where their symptom is, what part of your body it appears. I said, why do I have to study all this nonsense, which I don't believe, just to pass a test? He says, I agree with you. You know, he was a very, very nice guy, and he was smart. But he knew I was right because he himself had plenty of experience. He says, well, that's the only way you can pass a test. You have to deal with the state exams.
Yeah.
So I, by lying through my teeth, I passed all the exams.
Mm-hmm.
So then I got a degree in that, the diploma, and then the next thing, I was circulating around, and I began to meet other doctors, and then I went into, I met a natural hygiene doctor.
Yeah, we want to talk about that because you mentioned that a lot, natural hygiene, and we've heard about it. But we have to take a couple minutes of commercials. Is that okay?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, you stay right there. This is fun. Thank you so much for being here. Dr. Stanley Bass. Wow. Now, this is great stuff, man. I don't know how we found this guy. The angels delivered us to Dr. Stanley Bass. His website is drbass.com, 95 years old, and we'll be back. Previously with Master Herbalist Stephen Buhner on pine pollen.
It became a regular part of the diet because it's such a good nutrient food. And pine pollen is more of a nutrient herb that helps the whole body be more vital and strong. I became interested in it, looking at how you could use it to raise male testosterone levels for guys in middle age. So I began looking at that in some depth and found that there's a number of plants on Earth that contain testosterone in them that's pharmaceutically identical to the testosterone in our bodies, and that sort of started the whole thing off.
And pine pollen is one of those.
Pine pollen is probably the highest in testosterone of any plant that I've found so far. I mean, it's exactly molecularly identical to that in our body.
Pine pollen from Surthrival. It's strong. It works. Click and order all Surthrival links. Front page, oneradionetwork.com. Boy, I tell you, it's amazing what's going on in the world of testosterone, guys. I mean, heard something on the radio yesterday, station in Austin, and they're putting these pellets into guys, pretty expensive. They do a couple times a year, and then you release this testosterone and all this stuff. I think all these things are, my own opinion, are dangerous. You're really messing around on thin ice, Paul, when you start using pure testosterone and all these hormone replacement stuff for gals. I think it's all crazy. Now, certainly with the bioidentical and you do the creams, very, very safe, and that's a different thing. And you're just kind of boosting with the yams and all that, and very effective, very effective. But what they're doing with the testosterone is, in my opinion, is really not healthy at all and dangerous. But we can eat these kind of foods, like pine pollen, and it has natural testosterone in there, and then your body's going to kind of make what it needs. And it's a cool thing. So check it out, and you can certainly feel it. I can. Just a sense of well-being, the sexual stuff aside, a sense of well-being, which is a sense, of course, of good hormone levels. Pine Pollen from Daniel Vitalis. Dr. Bass was talking about sweating in the body. And, well, we know that sweating is a very interesting component of healing, that the body figures out what to do, and how to cool the body, how to burn up, and with a fever, how to burn up what it needs to do. And probably not saying it properly, but this sweating thing has been used since the beginning of time with now sweat lodges with the Indians, of course. And then now in the last, people have done steams and go to hot water baths, right? Those are really cool to lay in those hot water things. The sauna that we have will really transforms this healing light energy deep into the body. And it's a beneficial detoxification of organs and kidneys and liver and lungs and colons. Help you sleep, too, before bed. Put that little baby on. Stimulates blood flow all over the body. And it's been shown that it will knock out excess, if there's excess of these bacteria and viruses, fungus, parasites moving around. Dr. Bass is saying they're all there, but sometimes you get extra guys and it can help the healing process. These are cool. It's a far infrared sauna, help to stimulate the immune system to balance things out. You have extra this or that, too much of this or that, the immune system will balance things out. And sweating helps to do that. Just like without the sauna, your body may sweat to do it that way. But you can do it ongoing every day, sweating. And I think that it'll help your body stay in good condition. These saunas are $935 in tax-titled license delivered with the promo code ONERADIO, the Far Infrared Sauna. Previously, we asked Stephen Huer about casein, lactose intolerance, and One World Way.
Well, casein is a large protein molecule, and due to the deterioration of the human genome and the human species as a race, particularly in America, we've gotten weaker with each generation. Our digestive capacity is weakened as well, and so therefore bigger, harder to digest proteins are more difficult and allergy-causing, whether that be gluten or casein. When you cook a protein like casein through pasteurization, you make it even more indigestible and making it more allergy-causing. But traditionally, if you go back to 200 years ago when people were fairly robust in their health, raw milk products were all that was available, and people thrived on them, and there was no intolerances or allergies of any kind. And that's partly because it's raw, but partly it's because it's grass-fed, but partly it's because people were genetically much stronger and more able to digest protein.
We have no issues with One World Whey protein with that?
Right. There's no casein in this whey, and there's no lactose in the whey. People that have severe dairy intolerances, including even to just whey, thus far we have every single person that has those types of severe dairy intolerances have told us, I have no problem with your product. It's the first whey protein I've ever been able to take where it's been only positive.
You think because it's grass-fed and raw?
Oh, I know it is, yeah.
Yeah, you know it is.
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. Click and order, front page, OneRadioNetwork.com.
We are listener-supported, One Radio Network. Talk to Patrick now, 888-663-6386, or email patrick@oneradionetwork.com.
We're going to take some questions for Dr. Stanley Bass. You can email them, patrick@oneradionetwork.com. 95-year-old natural hygienist, naturopathic doc, chiropractor, nutritionist. He's written about 5 books. Down in Florida right now, looking for property to get set up down there. Spent a lot of time in New York. And Dr. Bass, thanks for being here this morning. Talk about this natural hygiene idea. What does that mean? We meet people now that are natural hygienists.
Okay. After many years, I began to hear about natural hygiene, which seemed to be the most advanced of all the natural healing groups. And I had been working with an orchestra at a certain time in my life that I was working in northern New York, Buffalo, New York. And we were living at a hotel there, working for about 9 months. And at the time, I was thinking of making a big change in my life. I was thinking of going very deep into spiritual subjects. I was studying the Indian Bhagavad Gita, the studies of Vedantic philosophy and yoga, and then I was studying Tibetan yoga, I was studying Chinese yoga, and I was studying the cultures of the world and the philosophies and teachings, as well as their nutritional concepts. So I went to a health food store. I was walking around there, looking to see what they had, and looking at books. And next to me, in the next stall, was a woman looking at things, and she looked at me and she said to me, are you from New York? I said, well, I'm not from New York City, but not from Buffalo, New York. So she introduced herself, and she was an old-timer in the healing arts and in spiritual subjects and yoga and all that. Mm-hmm. And we became friends, and she invited me to her place to try her lentil soup because she claimed that she made the best lentil soup in the world. And I tried it, and it was the greatest I ever tasted. Well, anyway, she started to talk about... as a result of her, I went into yoga. Now, she started to talk about yoga, and she mentioned a subject called, I told her, I said, I was thinking of leading a spiritual type of existence, maybe go to India and to an ashram and devote my life to study of philosophy and understanding, the ultimate teachings of these philosophies. Mm-hmm. And giving up all social life. So she said to me, why do that? It's not necessary. You can have the best of both worlds. You can live in society in the biggest cities in the world. You can have all the friends you want, and you don't even have to give up women. So I said, really? I said, how is that done? And she started to talk about what she called Kareza, which is comes from India. It's a very ancient teaching from the time of Tantra Yoga before the standard Raja Yoga. So she said that if you study this subject called Kareza, you could have a very amazing social life. And it would be the greatest social life you can dream of, because it's a method which takes a man and woman and teaches them certain things. For instance, the first thing they learn from the teachings of Tantra Yoga, which is the main subject that this came from, the first thing you learn is natural childbirth and natural birth control. Mm-hmm. Now, the natural birth control said if you practice Kareza, you would not have children, because Kareza involved a man controlling his semen. In other words, avoiding the orgasm proper. Mm-hmm. So that if a man came close to it, he would stop what he was doing, or slow down, calm down, and that way he would never come to the danger point where he'd lose control and give off his semen and make a woman pregnant.
Natural birth control.
Right, natural birth control.
Okay.
So I said, well, it sounds too good to be true, another one of those things. So I said, how can I confirm what you're telling me? She says, well, there's a doctor here has a fasting institution, a sanitarium. It's an old stone mansion in the park, and that's where he's fasting people, and he knows about this subject too, because he lectured on it. I heard him speak on it. So she said, if you want to meet him, he meets people in a health food store on a Friday night, and he takes care of his patients. He sees one at a time in another room, and then when they're through, he goes back to his Rochester, New York, where he had his hotel. So I went down there one Friday night, and I see about 12 people there sitting in chairs. Then the doctor came out and took one. And after 20 minutes, came out, finished, took another one. And then I went to him. I said, Dr. Kirsch, you recommended to me. Can I wait here and become one of your... I'd like to talk to you and find out, ask you some questions. He says, and then I told him a little bit about myself. So he said, it wouldn't be too good today because I want to get home as soon as possible. But I'll give you 3 days from now, you come to my hotel, my castle of health, they called it. You come there, and you can spend as much time as you want with me.
Mm-hmm.
I said, wonderful. I said, but one question before I leave. Have you ever heard of Carezza? He said, yes. I said, is it true that Carezza, and I repeat a few things about it, is absolutely true. In fact, some of our hygienic doctors, some of the greatest doctors in the world, are practicing it right now. I said, wow. I said, thank you, doctor. I'll be there for sure. So we went home. 3 days later, I drove down to Rochester. We had this beautiful castle. It's all stone. And he had a bunch of rooms, maybe 10 rooms. And then he had an office in there, and his wife was there helping him. And then when he was through with all his patients, they were fastest living there. But he was through with them for the day. So we talked for 3.5 hours. And I said, Doctor, what is natural hygiene? And I told him what I was trying to do. I said, right now I'm trying to follow the works of a man called, he's a fruitarian, and he's considered an expert on the fruitarian diet. He's recommending it as the ultimate diet in the world. So he said to me, I know that, doctor. I said, I put my family on the same diet, but I became very fascinated by his theory, and I had a paint to paint him and put him on my office wall, and he says, but let me warn you, it turned out to be a very bad diet, very dangerous, because after a couple of years, my daughter developed anemia. And then I had to take her to a doctor and get her a transfusion. And then his wife got sick, and he said he started to have trouble. His gums started to bleed. So he said, this diet is no good. You run into deficiencies on it. He said, stay away from it. And he told me all about his family. And then I asked if I could become his student. You know, I was a graduate of American School of Naturopathy. He says, yeah. He says, I've graduated from that school. Sure. I'll explain it all to you.
Mm-hmm.
So I found that's how I discovered Carezza, which is a tremendous subject.
Yeah. Well, we're going to get into that a little bit, maybe the second hour.
Good.
Teach us about Carezza. And you have a book.
Now you want me to talk about natural hygiene?
No, yeah. So the natural hygiene, though, it's more. I think if I remember, they're really into distilled water and lots of fruit, right?
Yeah. Well, no, that has changed.
That has changed.
Yeah.
So do you think it's?
I'll tell you what. I'll give you the solution to all natural healing. How to master it. How's that?
I'll do that.
Good. All right. So now we're bypassing the germ theory because I say the germ theory has very little to do with disease as far as I'm concerned.
So that's a big secret there. If you really get away from that whole thing, that changes the whole dynamic of everything, right?
You know where it's all at? What is the cause of all diseases? It's so simple that it's hard to understand. What you eat, there used to be a sign in the village when I was a kid. It says, what you eat walks and talks tomorrow on a health food store. And there was another health food store that had a sign, you are what you eat.
Sure.
So that stayed with me. And I found out, in all my years of research and schooling and everything, that there is one cause of disease, and that is what you eat. What you eat actually walks and talks tomorrow, and the way you think, the way you feel, even your emotions, your psychology, the way you think, your attitudes, and the speed of your mind, and whether you're depressed or stimulated, all these things are tied in with diet. And if you understand diet and live on the right diet, you can do almost anything you want. Now, I want to go to something very interesting. I researched one of the greatest stories in history called, he lived in the 1400s.
1400s.
Yeah.
No.
Now, he lived on, he was a doctor. Can I tell you the story?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. He was a man, he was a noble, an Italian noble, at the time of Shakespeare. And they were having parties and celebrating and eating a lot, banquets and all kinds of things. And there was always feasts and festivals. When he got to about 30, 32, he started to become very ill. And he started to get fevers and weak. And he went to a doctor there, one of those old Italian doctors. He says, "Doctor, what is wrong with me?" He says, "Luigi," his name is Luigi Cornero. He says, "Luigi, the only thing wrong with you is that you're not living right. You're eating too much partying, and your body is weakened from that and is falling apart. If you want to get well, cut back, start eating good foods, stay away from the big banquets, don't overeat, eat very small amounts of food, give your body a chance to recuperate." So here's what he did. He decided to go on a diet consisted of 12 ounces of food a day. That's about the weight of an apple. 12 ounces of food divided into all his meals, and 2 glasses of juice. A 7-ounce glass of grape juice for one meal, and a 7-ounce glass of grape juice for another meal. So he broke his diet into 2 meals a day, and he divided the 12 ounces into 6 ounces each meal, plus a glass of juice. So he went on this, and inside of 1 month, he got strong, and he started to get well. So he says, "Wow, that's where it's all at. It's all in the diet." So just by eating a very small, a tiny amount of food, the body had a chance to recuperate its energies, throw out the toxins from excessive eating, overloading, and get rid of all the junk. And he started to get well. So what he did was, just to sum it up, he lived from about 33, he went up to about 35 when he went into the diet. And he lived from 35 to 102. He never had a sick day in his life, and he lived on 12 ounces of food divided into 2 meals a day, plus 2 glasses of grape juice.
I'll be done. Now,
So then, when he got to 85, from 35 to 85, his relative says, "Luigi, you're 85, you're an old man now. You got to keep up your strength. You got to eat more. You're not eating enough to feed insects."
sounds like a mother, right? You got to eat more.
Yeah, that's right.
Eat more.
So just to please them, he increased his food. Listen to this. From 12 ounces of food a day divided into 2 meals, he increased it to 14 ounces. That's 2 ounces. It's like 4 tablespoons of food. So he got it. He started to get sick. He developed a fever, and in 2 weeks he felt like he was dying. So he said to his relatives, "I'm sorry. I'm going back to the diet that made me well. And I'm not interested in eating to keep up my strength." He went back to his old diet, and he lived in perfect health from 85 to 102. and he loved to tend to a garden. He lived on tiny amounts of food, and you know how he died? He was sitting in a rocking chair, smiling. He was very happy, and he closed his eyes and took a nap, and never woke up.
What a way to go, huh?
Right.
Yeah. Doc, this idea of minimal eating and fasting that you've really looked at, what about on the other side? We're told all the time that if we don't have the right amount of nutrients, whatever, calcium, zinc, and all these proteins and all this different stuff, the body won't work. So I mean,
all right, that's the theory, but
you don't think that's correct?
Look, in the first place, who knows how much the body needs? Nobody ever ate moderately. All people that in history that we know ate as much as they wanted, and most of them they overate, and they were always trying new foods, and they were always cheating and eating junk foods.
Sure.
Every age had its own junk foods, or even if they ate good foods, they ate enormous quantities of it.
Yeah, sure.
I heard of people eating 8-pound meals, and I've heard of Eskimos eating 10-pound meals, and all that stuff. And in all this time, I was doing research, and I had read books from all over the world of primitive races. Eventually, I went into the study of. Then, when I went to Curcio was one of the top nutritionists in the world.
Curcio?
In Natural Hygiene, Dr. Curcio.
Mm-hmm.
So he taught me what he knew, and here's something very interesting. At the time, the Natural Hygiene Society believed in vegetarianism.
Yeah.
And the vegan diet as being the ultimate diet in the world.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the highest they advanced up to the year of 1935. But then Dr. Shelton didn't talk about diet anymore. He just wrote about different subjects and health. But they didn't experiment with diet anymore. They felt they had reached the ultimate. They felt the ultimate diet was fruits, all raw, all fruits, nuts, and vegetables, all raw, and nothing else. Mm-hmm. Well, so what happened? So a lot of people went into that, and when they went on fruits, nuts, and vegetables, it was a better diet than what they were used to, because it was all raw, it was all nature's food, and they went on it, and they lived on it. But here was the catch: it was a good diet as far as they went, but it was after 2 million and more years of what you call primitive man and its food, where man had become a hunter-gatherer. If you study history, you find that man was a hunter-gatherer for hundreds of thousands of years, for most of history. And he lived on animal foods. None of them had ever been on a vegetarian diet. There was no such thing as a natural hygiene diet, a vegan diet, or a vegetarian diet. So they went to extremes, and we didn't have the literature that it talked about primitive man, what his diet was at that time, see? And that started to become popular just about 20, 30 years ago. And the Natural Hygiene Society thought that all monkeys and apes were the same like humans, only miniature examples. And they felt that they were all vegetarians. But they were wrong, because these animals were eating meat too.
Oh, they were?
Yeah. But the books weren't talking about it. The old books, they classified everything wrong. They didn't have all the experience and the research on that. So they made a lot of mistakes. And they classified the vegetarian diet as one of the highest diets. So that was the first disillusionment we came across. And then we began to read about other diets, and then about the high carbohydrate diet, the dangers, and things. And the diets we were living on was mostly high carbohydrate. It's nuts, high carb, and moderately high carb, and high fat, and then fruits with pure sugar, the most dangerous form of carbs, because it enters the blood very rapidly. And then the vegetables were good, because they were low sugar carbs, and they're safe. But nobody revised it, and it wasn't until about 20 years ago that we began to revise all this. And I wrote books showing that the Natural Hygiene diet was the best we knew at the time, but now the laws of life and the literature was the greatest that we know, but the diet never kept pace. So now the diet had to be revised and brought up to the date. And so I figured it was my job. And Dr. Curcio himself was revising the diet because he found that the highest diet of natural hygiene led to, he found his family was getting sick, and he found that a lot of patients that he gave vegetarian diets to, the babies were born with undescended testicles, they were born with fevers, they were born with poor vision and health problems. And some of them were stunted in growth, there were glandular problems, and because they were eating all vegetarian diet and didn't have all the hormones that meat has. So natural hygiene is being revised, and I'm one of the people doing it. And Dr. Curcio, he came to the conclusion from his research that if he added just two foods, which is eggs and raw milk cheese, that you could eliminate all the deficiencies that are produced by the Natural Hygiene diet, which had deficiencies. If you added those two, you had the right diet. So he introduced those two things, and the organization immediately jumped on him. They said, well, you're introducing eggs. Eggs are an animal food. You're introducing cheese. That's an animal food. And we can't go along with that, so they told him he cannot speak for them anymore.
Yeah.
They didn't let him talk, so he had to keep his patients alive by traveling and giving lectures all over the United States, which he did. And because he added those two foods, the doctors out and said he's no longer one of us. They outlawed him.
Yeah.
But I understood him well, and I was a close friend of his, and I knew they didn't know 1% of what he knew. But you couldn't fight with them because they had the power.
Yeah.
They had the political power of the organization.
They didn't want to change.
Yes, so then I changed, and I added the cheese and the egg. But then the vegans today, the big problem is they're what they call ethical vegans. They believe that it's wrong to eat a food that involves killing another animal. So they believed if you ate eggs, you would kill chickens that were born from the eggs, and if you ate cheese, you were stealing the milk from the cow.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a talk with a vegan the other day, and I explained to them that you cannot, if you eat eggs and they're not fertilized by a cock that sprays it with sperm, then the eggs will never become chickens. Then they're just eggs. They live and die as eggs. So if you ate that, you're not killing anything. You're just eating a food which will not produce an animal. That's all. And as far as the milk goes, you're not stealing the milk from the cow. You're feeding the cow. You're giving the cow grass. You're giving them sheds, a place to sleep, and everything. And all it's doing is producing a little extra milk. That's all. So there was a split right there, and I joined the part with Dr. Curcio, and the rest stayed with the old ideas. And now they're having a lot of trouble because they can't cope with all the illness because there's too many of them are running into deficiencies because they never had all the things the body needs.
Okay. Hey,
so now coming back to the subject of nutrition, it boils down that if you study nutrition and you get the perfect diet, here's what happens. First of all, if you eat the right amount of food, you'll rarely get disease because most diseases are due to overeating.
Overeating.
And even if you eat good food, if you overeat, the body cannot get rid of the waste as quickly as they're accumulating. So these wastes attract germs and bacteria to break it down. so they develop diseases, you know,
Mm-hmm.
digestive diseases and vomiting and all kinds of symptoms that are classified as germ caused by the medical profession. See, but it's not that's not the cause of it.
Right.
So that's the first thing. Overeating, even the best food, causes trouble. So then the most important thing is, what is the best food, the highest quality, the best combination, the best order of eating, and the food that will give you the healthiest body. And once you learn that, then what is the ideal amount of food so you do not overeat and you avoid all diseases.
Okay, we just need to take a short station break.
Right.
Just take 10 seconds, and then we're going to get into follow-up on what you said, how do people can find out what that ideal diet is for them. Stay right there.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a big thing.
Yeah.
Right.